Is that supposed to tell me eggs are expensive or they're not expensive, or I should buy more, or I should buy the eggs and drop them off at the Pentagon? I don't know what to do with that number. In our world of petrodollar, in our world of the U.S. can print as many dollars as it wants, in our world of trillions of dollars dumped into the government in the largest money laundering scheme the world has ever fucking known, in that world, we basically are in the world of MMT. The U.S. government can print whatever money they need or want. So your tax dollars don't technically go to these things, but it's still beneficial to think in these terms. If you were to take all the tax dollars, divide it up by the amount of money that goes to these various portions of the government, how much would go there? I still think it's useful to occasionally talk in these terms, even if we understand at the heart of it that the U.S. prints as much money as it wants, and that, just during COVID, the U.S. monetary supply was increased by like 20%, which is, in most countries would cause crazy inflation. Now, we are seeing inflation, but we haven't seen like unbelievable inflation. Anyway, this was put out by the Institute for Policy Studies. For some reason, they thought it would be a good idea to compare everything with the cost of a dozen eggs, which, as I go through this, I'm probably not going to mention that a whole lot because it doesn't help me understand this in any way. I'm not, it's 16 dozen eggs. Okay then. So this is for the average taxpayer. This is how much of your average taxes last year, so the taxes you just paid go to various things. Each of us, every American paying taxes, spent $3,700 for weapons and war, including $1,430 to Pentagon contractors, to Palantir and Google and Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics and Raytheon and Amazon. Each of us, every goddamn American, spent $1,430 on Pentagon contractors. We spent $5.80 just on SpaceX. We each spent $98 for deportations, immigrant detentions and border controls, versus just $26 for refugee assistance, which the Trump administration has just ended. Last year, you and I sent $26 to refugee assistance. These are the people with the least in our society. These are people who need help the most. These are people who are fleeing catastrophic lives, many of them because they live in countries that the U.S. has utterly destroyed, either economic or otherwise. And each of us gave $26 to refugee assistance, and Trump decided, that's way too much. Let's get that down to zero. And we each spend $98 for deportations. We each spend $149 for the National Institute of Health. Compare that to $3,700 for weapons and war. We each sent $39 to USAID, our coup manufacturing organization. And we each spent, you ready for this? How much do you think we spent on the Interagency Council on Homelessness that coordinates across agencies to end homelessness? Anyone want to give a guess? We each gave a penny. We each gave one penny to the Interagency Council of Homelessness. Now, what this really speaks to is the Interagency Council on Homelessness is a largely nothing agency that they've created to pretend that they give an F about homelessness. We live in capitalism that churns up human lives and spits them out, and a large percentage of our society ends up either homeless or maybe not quite homeless, but sleeping on a friend's couch, or maybe not quite sleeping on a friend's couch, but way behind on their rent, et cetera, et cetera. If you were to add up all those who are housing insecure, it would be way bigger than just the number of people on the sidewalks. And that is how our system works, and our government doesn't give two shits about these people because they are what's spit out by capitalism. They don't matter to the ruling elite. And so they create things like the Interagency of Homelessness, and they don't fund it because they don't care. And even, you know how much they don't care is even in the moments where solved, where a state has solved homelessness, essentially, like Utah, where they solved homelessness. They got rid of 95% of all chronic homelessness. Even in those cases, what did they do? They undid the policies that got rid of homelessness. They stopped doing it. And what policy got rid of homelessness? Giving each chronically homeless person an apartment and a caseworker. And that actually costs the state less than having someone homeless, because a cheap one-room apartment costs less than emergency services, the police services involved, the homelessness shelter services, etc. Now, of course, getting rid of homelessness does not mean people aren't suffering, because in capitalism, you inevitably are going to have great amounts of suffering. It just means there wasn't anyone chronically living on the sidewalks. Okay, let's move on. So we mentioned the $3,700 for weapons in war from each of us, which, in case you're wondering, equals 628 dozen eggs. I have no idea what to do with that information. Institute for Policy Studies. Is that supposed to tell me eggs are expensive or they're not expensive, or I should buy more, or I should buy the eggs and drop them off at the Pentagon? I don't know what to do with that number. I don't, why? It didn't help me understand anything. But of that 3,700, 2,900 for the Pentagon, 1,430 for Pentagon contractors, $610 for troops, $388 for the top 5 Pentagon contractors, $43 each and every one of us sent $43 to the catastrophic F-35 jet fighter. And here's another pop quiz. So the way Trump and Elon Musk and a lot of the right wing always talk about it, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are just a catastrophe. They are just destroying this country. Now, the heart of this is really just that they want to make racism great again. It's really at the heart of this. But how much do you think of our tax dollars, if 3,700 goes to the Pentagon, but from each of us, how much of that do you think went to DEI programs in the Pentagon? This catastrophic program, this massive program, right? They've been searching out anyone who might have been a DEI hire at the Pentagon. Anyone who's not a white male they accuse of being a DEI hire at the Pentagon. How much out of that 3,700 do you think we paid to DEI programs in the Pentagon? The answer, 37 cents. A giant amount to DEI programs. 37 cents from each of us. $115 for nuclear weapons. Which, by the way, we should be getting rid of. For those of you who have forgotten, we have enough nuclear weapons to obliterate the world multiple times over. Because apparently, just destroying all of humanity and the ability for crops to grow for like 1,000 years or 10,000 years or whatever, just doing that once is not enough. You want to be able to do that like 4 or 5 times. Because here's the problem: is what if you destroy the earth and you're not satisfied? You know? You're like, I feel like we need to keep going. What then? So you need to be able to do it multiple times. So we sent each of us sent $115 for nuclear weapons. We each sent $88 for aid to foreign militaries. And by the way, aid for foreign militaries, let's be clear, it's aid for militaries that are doing horrific things. Like the only real militaries we send, it's like fucking awful militaries like Israel. We don't send aid to countries that are really just need aid, just really struggling. Keep those numbers in your head. Definitely keep the number of eggs in your head, okay? That's 242 dozen eggs to Pentagon contract. What am I doing with that number? Keep that number in your head. 3,700 from each of us to the Pentagon. Now, here's what we send to things that people might need. You and each of us send $445 to food stamps, which 40 million people depend on. 40 million people depend on food stamps. And you and I send $445 to food stamps, which is going to be cut down because they're, other than fire a lot of the people that are capable of dealing with these things, so that like food stamps don't get to people just because the agency doesn't run appropriately. And a lot of people lose out on food stamps for that. But one of the bigger things is just changing the definition of poverty. You lower what counts as poverty, and then far fewer people get food stamps. You lower what counts as poverty, and then far fewer kids get school lunches. So that's one of the things I saw Trump is doing that or working on that right now, is just, what if we define poverty as if you make more than 2 cents a month, you're not poor. If you did that, you'd have like 10 people. That's great on food stamps. That's amazing. Yeah, we solved the food stamp problem. We just changed the definition of poverty. You send $120 to school lunch and nutrition, which 28 million kids rely on, and we sent $3,700 to the Pentagon to murder children overseas. There's a little rundown of where your money goes if you were to actually like chop it up, how much money from each American goes to these things. As I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, if you missed it, our money doesn't technically go to these things because the U.S. largely prints whatever amount of money they want. So, which also that completely sets fire to the argument that, oh, well, we can't give everyone health care because we don't have the money. We can't pay for Social Security because we don't have the money. We're running out of money. We don't have money. The other thing that sets fires to that argument of, oh, we can't have health care, can't give people health care like every other fucking country in the world. Can't do that because we don't have money. The other thing that sets fire to that argument is we have massive loopholes for corporations, for the richest American, so that they're paying like a tiny percentage of the amount of taxes that you and I are. All you have to do is close those loopholes and you would have crazy amounts of money. All you have to do is slightly raise the amount of money, the amount of taxes that the richest of the rich, 0.001% pay, and you can pay for all this shit. It's all bullshit. Anytime you hear someone make the argument, we can't do that because we don't have no money, you just punch them in the face immediately. I do not condone violence. Don't punch them in the face. Punch them in the face rhetorically. Punch them in the face with your amazing words.